Hello, and welcome to Take 10 on Tuesdays with the Tennessee Tribune. I'm Sandra Long-Weaver, Editorial Director for the Tennessee Tribune, and today our guests are Patricia Raybon and her daughter, Alana Raybon. And they've written a book together, which we're going to talk a little bit about today and how we got to this point. It's called Undivided, a Muslim daughter, her Christian mother, and their path to peace. It's intriguing. So let's talk about the beginnings of this book and, a Christian mother, a Muslim daughter. How did you get to that point? When did you decide to become a Muslim? And I know you were raised, you've been very active in the AME church.
Yes.
And you were raised in the AME church.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that decision that you made.
Sure. Well, I loved growing up in the African Methodist Episcopalian Church. It was just a wonderful place, really loving. Everyone knew me. Everyone knew my name. And I still interact with some of the people from there. I still have childhood friends from there. And so it was a really loving place. And I feel that the church is where I really first started to believe in God and love God. But I was confused as a child. I didn't understand the concept of the Trinity, and I kept that a secret. I didn't share that with anyone.
You didn't tell your mother or your father? No one? None? Your Sunday school teachers?
Not even my Sunday school teacher. I kind of pretended to understand the concept. I remember getting all the answers right in Sunday school. So I just didn't understand the concept of the Trinity, and I was waiting for the moment when I would suddenly feel inspired, and there's a part of the service where you walk to the front of the church and you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. Yes. And I was waiting for that moment, but it was frightening for me to not feel it coming. And so again, I didn't share that with anyone. And as I got older, as I got into my 20s and started going to college, and I just kind of started to move away from the church and look at different things.
Okay.
You could say I was sort of a hippie. That was my hippie phase.
Okay.
But I did start to read the Quran, and I knew some
While
people.
you were in college?
Yes.
And where did you attend college?
I first went to New York to attend a dance program with Alvin Ailey.
Oh.
And
wow.
it was really exciting. It was what I wanted my whole life. And when I got out there, I just kind of felt kind of different about the process. It didn't feel the same. It felt kind of like a job, and it was frightening, and it was overwhelming for me. I think I was just not ready.
Right.
So when I came back, I just kind of was doing some soul searching.
And you came back to Denver, Colorado,
yes.
where you grew up in the church.
So I came back, and I knew some people in the Nation of Islam, and growing up in Denver with my parents, I felt historically very connected with the African American movement and with the Nation of Islam because of just reading Malcolm X's autobiography.
Okay.
And so I was tied to that aspect of it, and also a little bit to the Islamic aspect of it. And so I really like the idea of God just being one without any sort of need to have anyone else to associate with God. That's what drew me to it the most.
Okay.
And so that, but again, I didn't really share that with anyone in my family. This was like a personal thing.
So your personal journey at that point.
It was very personal. I stayed in the nation for about 2 months. Okay. And then I decided to practice what you can call Orthodox Islam, or Sunni Islam. And so, that didn't really go well with my mother.
Well, that's what I was going to ask your mother to jump in and tell me. So, Mom, what were you feeling at this point when you realized that she's moved away from the AME church, where you've been very active, and now the self-discovery is leading you to the Sunni, Orthodox Islam at this point.
Well, Sandra, it's interesting. when I look back on it and after writing about it, the first thing that I really felt was a fatigue, because we had argued with Alana around a lot of issues, not with regard to personal philosophy, attitude, behaviors, and now here comes faith. And I'm like most mothers. I'm not a theologian. I'm not I grew up in the church, but I'm not a theologian by training.
Right.
And so when a daughter starts to say, well, I don't understand the Trinity, I just was not prepared or qualified even to know how to start having that conversation. And so I can talk about Christianity from the context of my own personal experience,
as a layman,
and what I feel as a church member layman, but also just as a person, and what I feel the Lord has done for me in my life and for our family. But that wasn't answering her doctrinal questions.
Right.
And so every conversation just became one of an argument with neither one of us really prepared to debate theology.
Oh, I see.
And so what happened is that we just naturally just started to avoid the conversation. And we did that for 10 years.
For 10 years?
And
you didn't talk about the faith or going to church or celebrating holidays, which often they're around whatever your religion is.
That's that.
No conversation
kind
on
of,
that?
I don't want to call it fiction, but that's assumes that the relationship is so strong that you can sit down very rationally and objectively and say, gee, how should we share holidays? We could not have that conversation. And so we just avoided it. And then a couple of years ago, I saw an author friend who'd written a book with her daughter about another topic. But I asked Alana, would she like to write a book with me to sort through these things we were having such a hard time talking about?
Oh, so that's when you were able to finally talk about the issues,
right.
The two of you, as you did the writing.
As a book project. This is my 5th book.
Oh, it is.
And Alana is an educator and also a strong writer. So I'm a journalist by training and by background. And so the invitation was not that out of line for me to ask her, would you like to write this book with me?
So it wasn't out of line for her to ask to write something, because Mom is a writer.
Right.
So she's not a talker. So we didn't have the type of relationship growing up where we could sit down and talk about things as personal and as important as religion. And so when she said, do you want to write about our struggle,
right.
I knew she was ready to talk.
Okay, so that was sort of the code between the two.
Yes.
Mother-daughter, okay.
Yes, and so I said, well, yes, because I couldn't turn that opportunity down.
Right.
Like she said, we kind of had this facade for 10 years that everything was fine. But every time I would pray or I would put on my scarf, there was this really uncomfortable feeling. And then also my husband, I often say, he doesn't like small talk because, any sort of political or religious discussion would come up and then I would just try to escape into the other room. And so I think because of that, we kind of both decided to just step away from the conversation. This is not going anywhere. And so I was ready when she approached me about the book idea. I was ready to talk to her, and I felt excited that she even wanted to engage with me. But I was really afraid of how she would respond to what I was going to say.
Okay. So how did you approach the book project? Did you come up with an outline for the different topics, so it led to a structured conversation as well, or?
Yes, to write a book proposal, publishers want to see a chapter by chapter design for your book. I've done that many times, and so it's interesting, Sandra. We even argued about chapter titles.
Well, that's what I was wondering. How were you able to get to that point? Okay.
So even that part of the process, was really hard for us. And typically, I write by myself. But this work of being an interfaith family, or being any kind of family that's trying to bridge a divide, really requires each party to let go of control and share the journey. And so I had to do that with not even writing the book, but just with the book proposal. Our publisher is a Nashville publisher, Thomas Nelson.
Yes.
And so my longtime agent represented the book for us and presented it around the country, and 2 publishers wanted it, and Thomas Nelson ended up being our publisher.
Oh, great. Okay.
But so from beginning, even before we actually sat down to write chapter 1, we really had to start learning how to listen, navigate, negotiate.
Right.
And that's what we did. Every word.
Every word. Every word.
Every word in every page.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't even get started. I mean, that's how it was. We could not get started.
Okay.
I felt offended by some of the chapter titles, even by the language in the proposal. I felt offended. It was really hard.
Okay.
And finally, we just decided to actually start talking, and that's sort of what opened the door. And I think as we were writing the book, for me, it became therapeutic.
I see.
Because for the first time, I felt like my mother was going to be able to listen to everything I had to say, but she had to read the whole
that had built
thing.
up over 10 years.
Yeah.
So, and not just that, we brought up things that, once you start talking in a family, then you go all the way back.
Right.
So things that had happened in childhood. And,
okay.
And it's interesting, once the book was released, and we started hearing from people who were reading it, it wasn't just families dealing with faith divides. I've heard from mothers and daughters who've struggled with issues around lifestyle and, you name it, any kind of divide that people have. I've really, I didn't expect that the book would relate to families who are struggling around other issues.
Other issues
that's
other
dividing
than
them.
faith.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's reached. It has a connection with many people. Then that you've heard from.
It has. It has really opened my eyes to the idea that within the family there can be so many things that aren't talked about, and just shoveled under the rug, and then it just builds up. And for us, 10 years. I mean, I feel ashamed that we wasted that long of our life not addressing these issues, because now that we've gone through the process, and I feel closer to my mother than I ever had in my entire life.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And so I'm so glad that we did it. And so I feel sad for people that are still not talking to their family members for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And so would you recommend then doing what you did, sitting down and trying to write it out, or did you approach the writing separately and then come together, or did you literally sit side by side?
We don't live in the same city, so we didn't sit side by side, but we wrote it in real time. So, if I had to write a section of a chapter, then I'd hand it off to Alana, and she'd write and then hand it back to me. So, we were always writing about what we were living. I see. From, the beginning of the book to the end. We hand off twice in each chapter. Okay. And neither of us ever knew what the other person was going to come back with. But we had to we were asked to write a list of suggestions for family members dealing with divides. Oh. And the first recommendation that we both agreed on is for people to acknowledge that there's a problem and then commit to working on it. Oh. And and that's not a small thing, because there are a lot of times when you want to say, well, we wanted to say, forget this.
So there were times when you almost said, this book project is not working, I don't want to do this. So.
Right. I was thinking, let's just go back to Thomas Nelson and say, thanks, but no thanks.
And how long did it actually take you to write the book?
it took us a year. You know, we
Yeah.
were on a deadline,
Yeah, we had
so
a deadline.
that was
Okay.
another stressor. You know,
Okay.
having to, number one, share your life with the public, the public, and then also having to figure out your problems in a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, we didn't solve everything, but
Mhm.
it was just nice to feel like I was being heard.
Yes.
That was a really powerful feeling,
Mhm.
to know that Mom was reading every single word,
Mhm.
and to read something and without the ability to immediately respond is very, very humbling.
I see.
Right.
And
Okay.
I learned so much about her, and I feel like I understand much more of her perspective now
Mhm.
than before. And so it has affected me in how I interact with other Christians, and how I talk to my children about Christianity. I mean, and holidays, and it has affected me a great deal, because of course, I can't completely understand her point of view, but I understand it so much more now.
Right.
Well, and I do.
Yeah. You have a
So-
better understanding of her
what I
life.
of her, but also of what I was feeling. I didn't realize I was grieving for a family dynamic
Mhm.
that I had always assumed would happen. That I'd celebrate Christmas with my grandchildren, and that doesn't
Right.
happen.
Right.
And I was really grieving that.
Mhm.
And the book helped me confront the grief, and so I could move on.
Right. Okay. So this has been a very positive journey for the two of you.
It has.
Yes.
Mhm.
And now,
Yeah.
so Alana, you are here in
Mhm.
Nashville, and Patricia, you still live in Denver.
Yeah.
So I know you get together occasionally for
Mhm.
family events and
Thanksgiving,
celebrations,
yeah.
which is a big one. But now, if someone wants to purchase the book, how can they do that?
Well, they can find it online very
Okay.
easily. Amazon
has
Books
it?
A Million, Barnes and Noble.
Okay.
Their local bookstore might have it. The library might have it.
Okay. Okay.
But
Are there any book
Yeah.
tours planned, or have you been doing? I know you've done a couple of talks earlier this year.
The biggest deal we did was with the Today Show. And if anybody's interested, I know this is for your program, but it's an interesting conversation. If they want to hear it, they can just Google the Today Show
Okay.
and my name or Alana's name. And that segment is still available online.
Great. Okay.
And with regard to the book, there is a book landing page called undividedbook.com.
Ah.
And it has all the buy buttons for the book and some other information, a reader's guide for book clubs and that kind of thing.
Oh, great.
So
All
it's
right.
a good book for conversation.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I've enjoyed our conversation today.
thank
So-
you.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Alana, for joining us. And good luck to you as you continue to grow closer. And
Thank
thank
you,
you for joining us today. Again, Sandra Longweaver, and I'll see you the next time.